Welcome to Canada's podcast. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Canada's podcast. I'm Phil Bliss, a Toronto host. Today, I'm going to introduce you to Michael Cammarata, who is the CEO of Neptune Wellness Solutions, a TSX company. Michael's got a very interesting background. He's actually the founder of Random Occurrence, a venture capital and private equity firm, and really is from New York, although managing a TSX company, as I said, that's actually headquartered in Quebec. So so we really have, a good North American story here, basically. And I think, what you'll find most interesting is how Michael progressed as a dyslexic kid to really becoming a millionaire by the time he was 13. So without further ado, let's say welcome to Michael. Before we go any further, you've got an interesting story, I know, and you're an American running a TSX company that's headquartered in Quebec, and today you're in Jupiter, Florida. So, I think that's the kind of sort of scenario. It's very common with Canadian, US. I mean, there's always a lot. There's a lot of overlap. We have a fairly large US audience and Canadian audience, but give us the sort of 5 minutes on who Michael is and how he got to be an entrepreneur.
5 minutes. I'll try. That'll be a record for me.
We'll spread it out over
No, honestly, it was like I was a highly dyslexic kid. I was born in New York, and I tried sports, and I knew I wasn't going to make it to the Olympics. I was very fortunate enough to meet two people that introduced me to a computer game called StarCraft, and I got my first computer, started playing it. Became really good at it and got into a group of gamers, and they taught me how to build websites. I think I learned more from that than I did from any of the schooling. Websites became popular, had to pay for the hosting to keep them up. So I started a hosting company. Then the hosting company took off, and then I got into online advertising to promote the hosting company, and then ultimately to build additional capacity to market the web hosting company. And then was very successful. I was one of the largest providers of inventory to a company called advertising.com that sold AOL for $498 million. When I was 17 is when I started my family office and started investing in different companies, mainly in fintech and the service industry at first. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate to learn about the entertainment side of the businesses, and that's really where it switched. And I was like, you know what? You can create content and market it, but if you can create content, market it, and have a positive impact, you can create a brand, and brands last for hundreds of years. And so instead of being a service business, I really wanted to focus on building my asset pool on brands that can make a difference in people's lives on a daily basis. Because I remember, you grow up, you pick a toothpaste brand or deodorant brand, or you have a different soda you drink, or now you have different types of sodas, and you really can enhance that person's lifestyle. And the more that I looked internally, like how I was being my own lifestyle, I started realizing that the products that I'm using around me affect it. So I started focusing on the brands. In 2015, we started this brand called Schmidt's Deodorant, 4 people, 1,200 square feet. And we grew to, over 180 employees, 30 plus thousand square feet, multiple offices. We're taking market share away from the biggest brands in the world that have been around for decades. And on our way to the IPO, ended up getting acquired and joined Unilever as a divisional CEO, focusing on my little department in health and wellness. And then ultimately, to speed it up, I got into looking at ingredients, because the products, the consumer's shifting. They want plant-based ingredients. And a way to make day-to-day products safer. A lot of people talk about cannabis as getting high, or adult consumption, or medical. But there's actually a much bigger purpose in the plant. It's in the cannabinoids. Like, we can make a plant-based natural deodorant be as effective as a 48-hour clinical strength deodorant, or toothpaste that's natural, that can fight gingivitis, or a shampoo product that can actually not cause hair loss or can potentially neurological issues if you use synthetics fragrance. And it just started even into cleaning products. And so that's when I started on my journey. It's like, okay, how do we get into that? And we found out that there wasn't a lot of companies focusing on that third use. They're focusing on adult consumption and medical. So I joined Neptune from Unilever and started focusing on that third use and really making finished form products and focusing on brands that can be used by plant-based ingredients. And Unilever's a partner of ours, and International Fragrances and Flavors, and Morgan Stanley we have a great relationship with now, and really Neptune is really at the forefront of that third category.
Why do you stay? I mean, you said the dyslexic side of things, so that moved you into being an entrepreneur. You were really successful. Sold to Unilever, went in as a divisional CEO. Why did you roll back into entrepreneurship?
Well, I think it's something that I'm the most comfortable with. I like building, right? I can see things when people can't, and I can go into areas where it's being disrupted or it may look chaotic, and I'll always come out on top. I think that's a gift of the way I think, and how much effort I put into my business world, and looking at it is I can see the solutions before most people can. So I think that that's something that's natural. And I think that when you look at Unilever or being in a big organization with 160,000 employees, being able to go into a company that has been around for 22 years and really be able to shape an image, but actually have it service some of the biggest companies in the world and really make a difference. Like, we can do things faster and more efficiently than some of the biggest companies, and to have that impact. Like, I think that right now it's like the cannabinoids are like the electric car battery, and and the whole consumer packaged good industry is going to be disrupted by them. And we're at the forefront of it. And I think being able to do that and put your mark on history, and people may not understand it at first. And believe me, I could retire, and I'm 35 years old, but I really want to make a positive impact. And I think if we can go and do that right now on a scale that, there's not many times in history you're going to be able to disrupt the whole industry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, you've done these things. I like to ask about challenges. I mean, because that's how we learn. What's the greatest challenge you've faced on your entrepreneurial journey to date that really taught you a lot that you can pass on to somebody?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is, how I think is different and how I communicate is different. Not everybody can understand how I'm looking at a problem or see it. And when I was really young, Ann Dodd, she was one of I was very fortunate to have a tutor because I was struggling in school. Like, I got a GED, right? But, I feel like I got a PhD at Unilever and definitely a double PhD now at Neptune. The hardest thing was the confidence, right? I think most dyslexic people or people with learning disabilities is they seek reassurances from other people, right? Mm-hmm. But it actually takes away from your gifts that you have, because you see things different for a reason. And you can't always explain it in the same philosophy. The best way to look at it is a math problem, right? If I try to use the formulas that the teachers taught me to solve a math problem, I'll never be able to do it. But if I look at the math problem as a question, mm-hmm. and I just have to provide the answer, then I can go and make my own formulations, and I can give them the answer. That's a little bit example on, like, in the school years, like how and it took Ann Dodd to help me build my confidence and to not fall into the trap of putting your faith in others, but looking at what your uniquenesses are and your thought process and trying to bring the people along with the journey, but have that confidence in yourself.
So, just on a more pragmatic level, can you give me an example of where you've hit that wall that we do at various times as we're building things, and sometimes you go over it, sometimes you go around. How give us an example of how you've managed to get around the wall, if you like.
Oh yeah, like in a deodorant company, I'll give you an example. My theory was I partnered with a lady who had a formula. It was in a jar. Costco, it's a $58 million SKU, right? I thought I can just stick the deodorant from the jar into a co-packer and put it into a stick and sell to Costco.
Okay.
What I didn't know that formulation, what made it so special at the time, was it's all plant-based, not liquid-based. The co-packers were all doing liquid-based formulas of natural deodorant, like Tom's of Maine and others. They weren't able to put that formula into it. So we actually had to build a factory. I've never built a factory before, never intended to build a factory before at that point. And it took years before we got the right PhDs without a scientist to help us modify that formula in a way we could protect the IP and use co-packers to bring it to scale. And we committed to launches that we had to deliver on. So I think that, most people would have been like, okay, we need to stop and start a new product line, or we need to change the formula. They don't look, I think that, taking that on as a challenge and seeing that that's what makes you unique, it may be a little bit more stressful. Or like when I came into the cannabis industry and a company that was known to be an extractor, I said, no, we're going to be a consumer packaged good company. We're going to build finished form products. We're not going to do crude oil. We're going to focus on servicing Fortune 500 customers and dealing directly with governments and building our own brands. Like most people have been like, why would you exit that? But it ended up being the right call, because if you look at a lot of the other extractors, I think we performed very well in pragmatic times and brought on a lot of new institutional investors where others struggled to do that. And I think that you don't always get to make the calls that are the easiest. Being in a publicly traded company, it's a little bit harder because you can't really always communicate as frequently as I would normally in a private company. Why the strategy and why we move different ways. But over time, people see that. And being dyslexic and, hitting walls every which way you go, because it's not a textbook, right? I think entrepreneurs, they make the textbooks, they create the opportunities, they can see things where they're not there, right? It's like people are like, why'd you get in the distribution business? Well, I'm like, look at Activision, right? Activision started working on buying distribution companies. Then they started partnering with publishers that made games, and then they became the publisher. You have to have the distribution, you have to have the content, you have to have all these different components together to build something that's big.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You mentioned someone that kind of mentored you earlier. And, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received that you use, constantly, or not constantly, but you come back to on a regular basis?
Well, I think it's, the self-confidence is huge. Like people, like that's the thing that makes or breaks people. I think the biggest thing that I keep going back to with Ann Dodd, who's one of my tutors when I was younger, was like, look at everything as a question and give the answer, right? It's not as always easy to bring out that thought process. And so sometimes it makes it more confusing when you try and walk somebody through your thought process. I think that the ability to understand that there's only one thing for sure in life, and it's change. Like that's the only thing you can count on. What it is today, the strategies are this moment are going to be different. There's going to be external forces of all different types, whether you're public, private, you're selling a toothpaste or you're selling a soccer ball. There's always going to be change. That is the thing you can count on. And not being shocked by the change, but actually embracing it is something that's made me very prosperous in my life, personally and in business. And knowing that it's an element that you have to really focus in on to grow as a human and being okay with it. And I think that, and being okay with yourself, right? And looking for opportunities. Like when people say, the best thing I like to do is find assets that no one else could make successful and then make them successful, right? That's something that I feel like is a gift of mine and something that I enjoy doing. But again, most people will be like, that's a lot of stress you put on yourself.
Speaking of that, I mean, imagine your 20-year-old self, if you could go back that 15 years or so, what advice would you pass on to your 20-year-old self? Something that you could sort of said, if only I'd done
Go
this.
back. There's a lot of things because, you can't play with the cards I have today. I was not dealt back then. I started from nothing and got a GED. Like I was not like being successful at any sort was good because it built my self-confidence. But I think if I can go back, I'd be like, be a little bit less stressful on yourself. Like, I'm my biggest critic. Like, people may think they're more critical of me. I think I'm definitely going to take their criticism and even be more criticized. So it's like, I think I would tell myself to, if not everything is break and make, and that I definitely try not to be so stressful or put too much stress on myself, because I definitely hold myself to high standard. I'm very fortunate from what I build. I don't take anything for granted. Like, you can lose everything in a day. But knowing the fact that you can survive and you're going to be able to prosper, and sometimes these lessons are there to teach you. Like, I don't think I was thinking that way when I was younger. I was like, there's no exception, right? It's like you have to. But I think that's probably, and I probably would have spent a little bit more time on the personal life, not just 99% or 100% on 120% on business.
Are you a morning or a night person?
Night person for sure.
Night person. Well, most of the entrepreneurs I meet are morning people, so that's kind of interesting.
Well, I have all my meetings in the morning, but I do my creative thinking at night. Like I like to listen to music and sort out my thought process, because I think that if you get too much into the meetings, you lose the vision, and I think the vision is what drives everything.
If you had to pick one word to describe who Michael is, what would it be and why?
I'm a problem solver. Like I like problems. Like, it's what makes me, like, when most people, stop fighting and get too worried, the more there's a competitor, the stronger I get. The more there's because I really like problem solving, and I like to, it's my sport. Business is my sport, and not everything you're going to win, not everything you're going to do it. But if you can take your passion and turn it into something that you can help change the lives of millions of people, like that's great. So I'm like, it's like you're playing on a sports team, but you're building products, and those products are improving the environment. Like, there's not another person. Like, the biggest thing is, like, everybody's like, why did you go with, I'm going to do 50-50 male, female employees? Not anybody else in cannabis has any of those goals. And I was like, well, because this is what makes us unique. We got to raise the bar because our other peers have to. Like, we're committed to 50-50 male, female. When I started, we were less than 23%. Now we're at 41%. We're almost to 50-50, inclusive of factories, which is huge. And like, carbon negative. We're not focusing on carbon neutral. We're focusing on carbon negative. Like, I think making sure that when you're doing something, you really are driving at that point to raise the bar.
So, what is the future of your industry? The not just the cannabis side, but the health side of it as well, the wellness side of it. I mean, what do you think? I mean, it's a changing scene, and you're a guy that says, you have vision. I'm interested to know, what those two things, do they stay together? Do they choose their own route? I mean, I'm interested to know what the future is.
Well, the stigma behind THC, which is really stigmatized the whole ingredient, because everybody thinks cannabis, they think of THC. I think that very near in the future, people will realize that there's going to be an alternative to aspirin, and it's going to use cannabinoids. There's going to be plant-based deodorant, toothpaste, soaps, cleaning products that are actually going to help the environment with sustainable packaging that are going to be healthy for you. I think consumers are waking up to the fact that, potentially 50% of all the diagnoses that they're having come from what you put in, on, around your body. And the majority of those are products that you're not even thinking about. Like, when you see that vape crisis, right? That showed you how an ingredient can be vaporized and can have a negative effect on somebody really quickly. But what about a shampoo bottle that has the synthetic fragrance in it that you're using every day for 50 years and you get hair loss or neurological damage? Like, there's so many products and problems in the house that consumers are waking up to doing that, and they're seeing plant-based as an alternative. When I was a kid, people probably thought plant-based were like weaker products or cheaper products. Now people think of products that they are more expensive or premium. but in the fact they're just going to be part of everyday products. I think the biggest change people are going to see is that cannabis is much more that plant, the hemp plant or cannabis plant. Inside that plant, there is hundreds of cannabinoids and different ingredients that can be made from it that are going to change every product you use. And the bigger industry is not going to be the adult consumption. The bigger industry is going to be the consumer products that you use on a daily basis, from cleaners and to all those household products.
Very interesting. Good answer. Good answer. Michael, we come to the end of this. How can, I mean, some great insights. I always say, you know, people listen, and how can they connect with you? I mean, it doesn't have to be email, but you know, people have questions quite often when they listen. So I can't answer them. You can.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm on Instagram, Mike Cammarata, or Twitter, Mike Cammarata. Also, if you go to Neptune's website, I have the community cell where any investor, anybody can reach out, and I do my best to try and get back to everybody. Like, I do think that within the limitations of what I'm allowed to talk about based on public disclosures and all of those other regulatory bodies, I do my best. Mm-hmm. I'm always excited to engage, and you know, this is one of the most unique times. Like, we're going to see one of the biggest industries in the world disrupted in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Exciting times. Thank you, Michael. That really good perceptions. Thank you. And thanks for coming on Canada's podcast.
Anytime.
I've been listening heavy, so it's very interesting.